for getting here. So I'll try to stay behind the mic because they told me they're recording, so I'll make sure to do that. But really appreciate being here and hopefully have some conversation about cyber hygiene. We'll kind of start out because I know a lot of what's been, when we talk about cybersecurity, and a lot of time probably what we've seen, some of the sessions deal with some of what we think about as high-level cybersecurity and what corporations and organizations, government is doing to protect our digital assets, but a lot of times a lot of that starts at home. And so even though we can be in the best cyber environment at work, if we come home and our cyber footprint is weak at home, we can bring that back to our organization and risk all that work that has been put in. So we'll have a couple conversations and feel free to add to it as we go through. But a lot of times this is what we normally think about when we think about breaches. These are just some, and these are some just I put out in the news. So not picking on any organizations if you happen to work at these, not picking on them. But this is commonly what we think about when we think about cybersecurity breaches in the millions. What has happened. But a lot of times what we're seeing when we see these millions of breaches, users that are being impacted, also the breaches happen for months or years before it's recognized. And then we move into the world that we're in now where a lot of people are working from home, they're working remotely, data is everywhere. So it's just not at our organization. So these are just some here, and they keep growing, and just a couple other facts that I pulled out is just cybersecurity criminals can penetrate 93% of companies' networks. And so basically that's everything, so we got 7% of people that might not have discovered it yet. And so this is, organizations that invest a lot of money, time, and efforts into protecting their digital resources. And so think about our home networks, how much money, how much time that we've spent at home, that what is there. So frequencies have continued to go up over time. And so, even if you're monitoring your home networks and you see, okay, how often, just because I'm weird sometimes and I'll just look at my logs and just see, how often is someone hitting my devices in a home from the outside? And it's constantly, and these are the ones that, a lot of times that we think are protected and that everything is protected. But we have to make that assumption that, if 93% of companies' networks are being breached, then our home networks probably aren't as secure as corporate networks. So we've got to kind of go into it with that. But one of the good news out of these stats is some of the most common attacks deal around with phishing, social engineering, stolen devices. So right there with the proper training, that regardless if we're talking at home, if we've got a child that's on the internet and they're aware, because a lot of times it might be taken for granted that because kids are so tech savvy and they used to having a device in their hands from the time that they've been, really that they can remember doing anything, that they're also cyber aware. And it's probably the exact opposite. Because they've been exposed to technology, they've been using mobile devices, since they've been 3-4 years old, that they kind of take it for granted that everything is there and this is just part of life. And so, but the good thing is, with training, a lot of that can be mitigated. And stolen devices. If we think about devices, cell phones and laptops, how much data is there, but how commonly it is if you see you're at a restaurant or at a bar and someone gets up and they go to the restroom, they might leave their phone, on the table on the bar as they go to the restroom. They're going to be right back. Of course, who wants a phone? People will think because it'll get locked up and you can't use it. But a lot of people, that's not the device anymore. This, hundreds of dollars or even an expensive device that's a couple $1,000 isn't the value anymore. It's what's on that device and the connections, if we kind of think about everything that we have on our phone. And then even small businesses, a lot of small businesses are ran from home, and 14% consider their cyber attack and risk mitigation highly effective. So that's only 14%. You know, if there's any math people here, do the numbers too early, but what are we at? 86% of, you know, businesses, small businesses, that a lot of times are based out of the home, say that they're not properly protecting. And so probably of this 14, there's some percentage there that's, you know, think they're doing a great job and aren't. So just shared this image pulled from CISA. But if the one thing of looking here is we've, you know, all know about the critical infrastructure in the industry that are identified as being part of our critical infrastructure. If we look at this, you know, we probably all are either part of this critical infrastructure. We know someone, part of it, most households have someone that's involved in part of the critical infrastructure. So that's why I wanted to, you know, share this, because a lot of times we think about just these organizations, but if we take a step back and we think about the people in these organizations and where do they go and what do they do, you know, they do a lot of work and have a lot of information outside of the organization, even if it's a text, even if it's an email about something, all that information, you know, has to be protected. And it's one of the things that, you know, we constantly get into, you know, the iPhone and Android, you know, which is better debate. I'm not going to start that this early, but one of the things, because the platforms are different, when we're texting across platforms, that information isn't secured by default. And so that's one of the risks with there's those two different platforms. But how often do we think about it? We as a users for the most part aren't aware of that and really don't know, or there's no mechanism other than if you're an Android user and you don't get the liked ability when, you know, your peers or friends are using iPhones. That's really the only reason that you know. And so what data that's being protected there or not protected. And so all this has always been a risk. But, you know, what did COVID do? You know, it forced a lot of us to work from home, to have to work from home, but we had to do it quickly. And so a lot of times rollouts that cybersecurity departments might have taken, you know, a year to do proper planning, you know, to implement processes, procedures, assessing it, testing it, they were forced to do it in a couple months. And so to say that a year, 18 months of work was done exactly the same in a month or 2 months, I think all of us know that that's probably fooling ourselves. I mean, we got it done, and a lot of times in the IT world, you get it done and you say, okay, we're going to go back and we're going to, you know, look at this again once things calm down, once the fire stops. And it never happens. And so now are these holes and vulnerabilities out there. And it blurred the line of work and personal devices. So now it's common, you know, for, you know, someone to say, hey, I'm going to be at a conference, I'm going to jump on this call, I'm going to jump on this meeting, where maybe a few years ago, you know, we would have been like, I'm at a conference and I'm out of the office that day, because now we're used to this world of constantly connected. And so even, you know, taking a call somewhere, you know, the conversation that you're having, I think most of us assume that people can't piece together the other end of the conversation because we're talking and they can't hear that other person. But, you know, how much of, you know, what you're saying can be pieced together, or, you know, might be even interpreted the wrong way if they hear you saying something. So that's something that we have. This blurred line introduces a total another, you know, risk when we talk about, you know, what happens at home. And so we're all responsible for, you know, protecting that critical infrastructure. And so even if we've got kids at home, of getting them to understand, you know, what are the risks of friends coming over to the house and connected to our Wi-Fi. You know, so if you've got a child that's, you know, the social person, that you've got the household where everybody is always there, of course, you know, they don't care what's for dinner, but can we get on Wi-Fi? You know, we can go a couple of days without eating, but 30 minutes without Wi-Fi, it's an emergency. So just think about it. A couple of weeks ago, my friend had son had some friends over, and they were all on their devices. He kicked them out of the house, and he said he hadn't heard from them in a while, so he was like, went out to check on them, and all they were doing, they went on the side of the garage and sat down and connected to the Wi-Fi, and they were perfectly fine being outside, so he revoked the phones. But that's a risk. Each person that we connect to our personal network, we bring their vulnerabilities with them, and we connect it to our networks. And so what's that level of risk that we're willing to accept? What work we do at home, it might change the type of wireless device that we have. So we've got multiple networks, and we can have a so-called guest network and our real network at home. Who would have thought we would have had that need here, 5 years ago, of having multiple networks, at the wireless networks at home. But it's just something, and if we don't have multiple networks and we do work, sensitive work at home, then we might have to tell a guest, unfortunately, you can't get on my wireless network. So, that's just sometimes, it's not an easy conversation. It seems like you're not being a good host, but, we've got to pick security, and sometimes it comes down to cost. Do we want to invest in a different router? But now I think we're at a places that we should. And so we always see these phone chargers, whether we're at an airport or haven't walked around that much. I don't know if there are any here, so if it's any vendors that have them here, sorry, this is not against these, but it's a risk. These are a risk, these public charging stations where we plug our phones in and we charge. We don't know what's on the other end of that cable. So we could be plugging our device in, and our phone could be charging, and all at the same time, our data could be being extracted via that cable. And so sometimes we'll say, because my wife has even told me this. She tells me when I go off on one of my tangents about this stuff. She says, "Well, why would the company do that?" And it may not be the company. So the company may not have been aware. The company, they've ordered this charging mechanism, and they're providing this service, and that's, to the company, that's what they know. And so a lot of times, with hardware, we make that assumption because it's new, it's safe. And that's just, not the case. So the company that, shipped this, or someone at the company, or somewhere in between the company and when we received it at our dock, could have put something on here. And most companies, outside of, probably, really companies that are doing a lot of high-level work, military, will not go back and investigate this device, and they aren't going to have the trail that, of the device from being created to where it is, like some of us might be used to in the military. So this is a risk. So it's just something, I'm not saying, in an emergency situation, just it never happens and we shouldn't do it, but it's a risk. We want to be aware of what's going on. Not to say that, if you've got, and sometimes I'll look for these chargers, can I plug my power cable in anywhere, if without it being the USB in. But once you plug that USB in, you're opening up, anything to your device. So, what steps can we take to help, everyone in our households? A big piece is training, and some of this training sometimes is just conversations, that we can have conversations, or as I say, my wife likes to call it tangents about this cyber stuff, but just talking with people in the household to understand things like phishing, that if we get an email, to make sure where that email is coming from, that might, sound simple to a lot of us here that are, used to looking at some of this, or, it's kind of in our wheelhouse, but email is one of the riskiest things out there, so it's kind of like we're just walking out, in an area that, we really know nothing about. We're getting all this information, and we've got to filter it based off of, very, few things that if you think about, even when we checked in for the conference, we showed our ID to get our badges, but on the internet, we're really trusting everything strictly from a name. So we see, does the name match up? I'm going to open it. So we do that in very little other things in our life. We ask for information that we go about to verify. But with email, we don't verify it. Most of us don't verify it, even though there's mechanism that's been in place for, years to let us do that, because it takes a couple extra steps. Most people don't implement it. So we just want to be aware that when we're opening emails and clicking on links, links make the internet work. Without the internet, without links in the internet and embedded code, we probably would have had a different experience. So it's a good thing, but at the same time, it's extremely, extremely risky. Most of us, because a lot of our email now is HTML embedded code, it gives us a preview, it opens up our email, it's really convenient that we can see these pictures. On the other side, organizations can analyze, how long did someone open this email for? Did they open it? What percentage of our distribution list opens these emails? So it gives us good data analytics, but at the same time, if it's an attacker, they're able to find out that same information, or maybe they're able to get malware onto our device and then into our network. And again, because we're using VPNs to connect to our work networks, if we get malware on our home computer, we're in essence now placing that infected device on our work network. So we've got to think about it that way, that because most of us are using VPNs, and to get our household to understand that if our device at home gets connected, it's like we're taking that connected device and plugging it directly into our organization's network. Social media, and I've never been a huge social media person, just because I don't think I'm that interested or interesting, either one, even outside of cyber. But we expose ourselves to so much with social media, and it's something that we wouldn't do any other place. Like, we wouldn't go to the mall, we wouldn't go outside in the hallway and start telling everyone, everything about us, when our next vacation is. We plan to leave our house open between these hours each day. We wouldn't do that, but because we do it online, somehow it's okay, So it kind of makes being a, if you will, hacker, to throw that term around, not as difficult today, because we're giving, all the information away online. And so that's like hard for, especially a lot of younger people that use social media to stay in touch. Yep. Nope. Wait. So the question was, and they're recording is the reason. Question is about spearfishing. So spearfishing is just targeted fishing. So so what some of these attackers will do, they'll go on the website and they'll find out, okay, this is the name of the CEO, and so they'll send you a message at that company and say, hey, can you do this wire transfer? Of course, if the CEO says that you want to be responsive, and you send that wire transfer. So thanks for that. And social media, we're giving all this information away. And so, it's just hard to understand, to get this over. That, if you're going to share pictures of every, moment, maybe wait a couple moments. Wait till you're back at home if you just have to share everything, just to start working with, people on that, understanding that. And also misinformation and disinformation. And so in some sectors, these are two totally different things, so the intent is different. So when we're talking about misinformation, disinformation, one being intentional and one being unintentional. But at the end of the day, both of these are dangerous, so even if we look at a cyber attack, if we accidentally delete all of our data that we've been working on for the past 6 months, is that any difference really than if we get attacked and our data gets deleted? It's gone, and so sometimes the motivations behind if something's truly misinformation or if it's disinformation is different. It kind of helps us stop it and figure out where it's coming from. but we've got, this is extremely dangerous, and it goes with social media a lot of time also, but it's so much things that can, change what we're doing, our habits, and, social engineering, misinformation, disinformation, it's highly effective, so it is highly effective, even if it's of using resources to identify, different things. There was recently, a report of in jurisdiction, I don't remember which jurisdiction in Tennessee, about there was a serial killer online. There had been a serial killer online, and so the law enforcement agency spent a lot of time and effort to kind of dispel this panic in the community that there wasn't a serial killer going on. But I mean, that's effort that they could have been, using for something else. And also that, it was fear that people had that there's a serial killer in their community, and they were taking precautions, that they didn't have to. And so this is something we all love, right? We need to go out and buy more and more and more of. But it feels like this is where we're at, with IoT. And IoT is great. It's got a lot of great needs. But if you would have asked me, if you would have asked me, 5 years ago or so that, what was wrong with a crock pot, and if you had said the thing that was wrong with the crock pot is I can't control it from the internet, like that would have just been like crazy, like I would have been like, this is a joke. But nope, I was in the store recently and there was a crock pot that you could control from the internet, and I was just like, I've never changed. Maybe I'm cooking wrong. I've been cooking for quite a while, but I've never been changing my crock pot settings that much that I couldn't do it manually. But this is the world that we're in. Everything can connect, good or bad. It's just where we're at. And so most of these things, when we're talking about IoT, and this stat here says that 64 billion devices here shortly, according to Insider Intelligence. They'll probably grow more and more. If we kind of think about it, everything is connected, from our car to our TVs. We're truly now, if our internet goes off, we're like, okay, can we get into the garage even, because, who's got the garage door opener anymore? A lot of time we've got it programmed on our phone. And so all these are risks. But because of all these devices were created for a purpose. They were created to cook food. They were created to keep food cold. They were created to let a garage door open. They weren't a security device. And so this was an afterthought, that this device was in place to do its job. And then somebody said, I've got a great idea. Let's connect this to the internet. Somebody else probably said, that's horrible. Who would ever buy this thing? But that person got outvoted at the meeting, and they connected it to the internet. And so now the engineers are tasked with, okay, you've got limited space, limited memory on this device. It's still got to do its thing that it's designed to do, and now we want you to make it connect to the internet. And so they come back and they say, yep, we can do it. We've got to take out this, and we've got to, maybe add in this feature. It's normally not done that way, but, we can do it in this instance. And sometimes we'll hear these, even when these vulnerabilities are discovered, the companies will come back and they'll comfort us by saying, well, it's not realistic because someone has to be within 30 feet for 10 minutes, and they would be discovered by then, or they've got to be within 10 feet for 2 minutes. And so that makes us feel better, and we're like, great, we're safe. But that's the processing speed today. In a year, it's within 1 foot, and 1 minute in a year, it's instant. So, it's just, each one of these things open up a, additional risk into our home networks, and then into our home networks, into potentially, our work environments that we have. So it's a risk. All this stuff is cool. I like it. I like playing with it in a lab. I'm just not embracing it at home a lot. I did recently put in my first camera but one of the things that it's outside facing away from the house. So, if it does, someone's able to compromise if they aren't looking at, looking at the houses. That's kind of risk though that I knew putting in. I was honest, and I said, okay, this is a risk, and so I understand that, and I try to keep up on the firmware upgrades of the devices, which a lot of people don't. Like you don't realize it. Like most people buy these things, and then they set them up, and the companies, they make them easy to set up because of course they want their product to be bought, so they connect, and then they're probably at that same firmware until the device doesn't work anymore, or the household goes out and buys a new one. So, and then the other thing, not necessarily, the main reason, but the privacy of the data that goes with this device. So if you think about something like a garage door opener, that tells a lot. So someone can say, with a pretty good certainty what time everyone leaves and comes home just from looking at that garage door. So if you're able to look at that garage door history for a month or a couple months, I know when you're home, when you're going. I know your routines probably better than people in your household do. Somebody could look at that data, and you might ask someone, in a phone conversation, someone, are you available for a meeting at such and such time? And then you might say, well, I've got to look at my calendar. Someone looking at that data could be like, no, you're on your way to work during that time, or no, you typically do something on Saturday mornings during that time, just from the data that's there. So, we always talk about in cyber protecting data in motion and at rest. So when we're protecting it in motion, other conversations that we have to have with people are network spoofing. So, when we go somewhere and we see a device, a network, a Wi-Fi network that's named, Marriott, what, how do we know that's Marriott network? Anyone can create a Wi-Fi network and pop it up anywhere. And so we're going just on name. That's all we're going on. And even if that network isn't a guest network, it's got a password. Like a lot of times there's a private key that's just, a group of letters. And so if that's the case, and I pop up this fake network, well, if I want to go through that extra effort, if I'm a attacker, I'll just go to that company, pick up their little slip or look on the wall and see, okay, that's the name of their key, and I come back and I name mine the same exact thing. So it logs in, and now everybody trusts that they connected to a secure network. And they did. They just connected to the attacker's secure network that's now able to intercept what they're doing. So it's just risk like this. VPNs are relatively inexpensive. Some are free, but most people don't use them. And even at home, typically, I still connect with the VPN even at home. It just is an extra level of security. Some people will say, it decreases your speed just a little bit, and it does. But we give up, speed and efficiency for other things just to make sure that we're doing it best practice. We give up a little bit of speed in our daily lives of driving because we want to drive a little safer. Granted, we could get there a lot faster. Maybe some days we do more than others. And so the same thing with VPN. Sometimes if I'm at home and I'm working on something that's really resource intensive, will I maybe disconnect from my VPN for a little bit? Yep, that I'm at home. But you've got to just build this thought that VPN are not a, kind of a add-on today. It should be that it's something that all of us use the majority of the time. So it shouldn't be something that only if we're working remotely that we use. I mean, we've got a need to securely connect back to our workforce, our workplace, if that's the case. But even on our day-to-day basis, we want to make sure that we're using VPNs. guest networks, again, two sides to that. Never connect to a guest network, but if you have someone that just wants to connect to your network, friends of kids, or even my friends come over. My wife gives me that look sometimes. Like we'll have friends visiting, and they'll say, "What's the Wi-Fi password?" Like she'll look at me and then she leaves the room, because I've got a separate network, and so she'll kind of let me be the bad guy on that one. But just guest networks are dangerous on both sides. And IoT network. Yeah. Yeah, so I've got two. I've got the question was about the two networks. So I've got one network has actually three technically. Kind of go into this next one, but I've got one network that I've got most of my devices on. And then I've got another one that I've got all of my IoT devices on. And then there's a third one that I have that I give to anyone else, and I typically keep it turned off. So like if you just showed up, knocked at the door and came in and were asked to get on the internet, I'd have to be like, well, hold on a second, let me go and enable this one. But if I knew someone was coming, I enable it and I give out that password, and when they leave, I shut it down. Yeah, so the point was that VPNs can be a risk because data is being sent all over the world, could be being sent all over the world through their network. So that's a good point. Definitely pick a VPN that allows you to choose where your data stays and what networks. So that's a good point. Thank you. Uh-huh. And with IoT networks, because just to limit the risk, so like any cameras, any crock pots, any of that type of stuff have a separate network so that if someone does compromise those devices and get on that network, then at least they can only kind of traverse from one, device, IoT device to another, and they can't get to your other information as easily. And so what about some tools that we can use just to protect data at rest at home? So we have the file servers, in our work environments. But what about at home? Most of us are saving unencrypted files without passwords at home. So if somebody gets access, they've got it. Like there's no extra step. They're in, they've got it. All they're doing is copying data and everything is there. Microsoft Office has password protection built inside of Microsoft Office. So whether you're in Word, PowerPoint, Excel, you can do a save as and pull the options down and give a password to that particular document or spreadsheet. Most people just don't use it. It's an extra step to open it. And of course, like any password, if you forget it, you can't get access to it. Is this saying that this is foolproof, that, no one can get into a document that is saved with an Office password? No, that's not the case. It's an extra step. I always talk about like cybersecurity as being, technically we talk about defense in depth, but it's like if we think about our house. If we put a screen door up on our house, that's going to keep most people out. Our friends, neighbor, they're going to come by, they're going to knock on our screen door, and we don't open the screen door, they're going to go away. And that's enough. That's probably 75 to 80% of people that screen door keeps out. So then there's that other small percent of people that will be like, oh, the screen door, we just saw them leave, we can bust through here pretty easy. So what to do for those people, we put a regular door on, and then that's going to, be a lot of effort for people. And so that keeps out, the other 90-something% of people, they don't want to break a door down. Can someone break a door down? They can break a door down. But, we're doing things to mitigate it, to make it, less possible that someone can do something. It's one of the things, and I think even we have to be realistic, when I talk about this, organizations, that we can't stop, that now we're at a point that we really can't say that we're going to prevent somebody from doing something. We're going to make it more difficult and hopefully longer, that now we're able to detect them before they get in. So like if you think about in the physical environment, if we put barricades and fences and we move the perimeter out a little bit, the intent with doing that isn't, we know that that's not going to stop everyone, but it will slow them down enough that now we can react before they can get to what's important. So that's the same thing we're doing with data. Password vaults, password vaults, pros and cons. The pros to using password vaults or programs that will let us store our passwords is they will, we can create extremely complex passwords that we use on a constant basis. And so it's really great to use password vaults. The downside is if we create a password vault with an extremely weak password to get into, then we've just made it extremely easy for someone to get to our extremely difficult passwords. And so now we've kind of defeated the purpose. So and that's what sometimes people do with password vaults. They turn on the settings. It's got to be 12 characters, no symbols. All symbols. They do all this complex stuff, which is great. And then they make that master password, their name, their dog's name or the spouse's name. So that's where the training comes up again, and we constantly have to change that master password and maybe look for a program that makes us do multi-factor authentication with it, to maybe send us a text. And it is an extra step, and probably most of us, hate that extra step, that we're trying to log in to email, we're in a hurry, and where's my phone? That's usually late night for me when I'm trying to do something. I've kind of started winding down. The phone might be in the bedroom, and I'm trying to finish up some work. And then I get the message that, I've sent the verification code. So, it's frustrating, but it makes us, more secure. Screen locks. And again, we think about screen locks when we say that we're at home. Why do I lock my screen? But it's still important because our homes aren't foolproof. It's kind of like we keep other important things at home and we still have safes, so it's kind of like the same thought that we keep important documents, we keep important things in safes at home, and because we know that it's possible someone might break in when we're gone, and we want to make sure they're protected. Same thing here, that we want to make sure our computer, our phone device is locked whenever we step away. And then, just like companies back up data, we also want to back up data at home. A lot of times sometimes people will say, I hear this a lot, that I really don't have anything important, or a lot of times even in cyber, people will say, well, I don't have anything to hide. And so kind of my response to that typically is you should if you don't. And I would say that you probably do. I'm guessing that you want to hide your bank account information, just assuming that that's something that you want to hide. But we've got all this data, and what if it's gone, it's deleted, I've got a friend that's a photographer, and he had shot a wedding, and something happened. He didn't have his information backed up, his cars backed up, and he lost the pictures to the wedding. So so that's how he felt like, oh my goodness. So he paid a lot of money, actually more money than he made on the wedding, to get the data recovered. The company was able to recover most of the pictures, so it was a good thing, because he probably still would not be a photographer if they were not. But it's having this backup, and so how Um, you know, how often should you back up? And it just depends. Like in that case, I think it might have been a week or so later. So not a long time. So should have he backed up in that case right after the wedding? Next thing that he did should have been to back up pictures even before he processed them. Like he said before, his normal process was, he would go through the pictures and then he backed up the pictures after he deleted out all the, ones that weren't going to be used or the junk ones. Then he deleted them at that point. But in this case, it was too long. Even though, like most of us probably think a week, later, it's not really, that long. But in that situation, it is. If you think about a bank, a day is too late to delete. To back up data. There's got to constantly back up. So it's just personal need. What changes in your household, how the frequency, and to back up local versus the backup cloud. It's one of those things that it's the iPhone and Android. Which one's safer? Which one? I say a hybrid way to have some things backed up locally, some in the cloud, so that if you do have an event like a fire, flood, or something, that you have the opportunity to get this data back from the cloud, but that you're not dependent on the internet solely to get access to your information, just in case something was to happen and you weren't to have internet access. Video games. So if you've got any gamers at home, or if you're in it, if you are a gamer, huge risk, huge hole into your networks. Again, video games are just another IoT device. So everything we talked about IoT still, respond here. But if we think about video games for those of us that have played video games for a while, that's the nice way to say the older ones of us, but they've played video games for a while. We know how they've changed over the years. They went from, the moving of a ball across the screen to a line to where now when you walk in to someone playing a video game, you've got to kind of do a second look. Is the game on? Who is this? Because it looks so, real. But because of all that, there's so much coding in the background, and any code has vulnerabilities in it. So all those billions of lines of code are going to have vulnerabilities, and it's once that game is released, it's released, and so it's less chance of that being updated. We're going to go by the next version of whatever when it comes out, but we've still got that game that's there. The social engineering, so our third-party games, to where we're connected via the internet, and we're talking with people. That's another opportunity for social engineering to happen. And so it's something that really we want to watch what we're talking about at home, but especially for young people. This is an area that predators can get into households undetected, because we might monitor cell phones. Parents will monitor cell phones of kids to make sure what's going on text. But the video game is a way that predators often get in, and so they'll pose as another kid on that game, and they start gaining information, and they gain trust, and then say, okay, maybe let's meet at the mall, or something like this. So watch out for video games. And firewall modifications, because we're connecting across the internet. Sometimes we've got to make tweaks to our firewall, and again, the instructions that come with the video games want the video games to work. So they'll say, open up this list of ports. Maybe we don't need all of them open. Maybe there's one port in our firewall that we really don't need for that game, but they've got one add-on device that uses that range. We're never going to purchase that, but we open this whole range, and every port that we open on a firewall adds another way into our networks. And so when we start making these changes in our firewalls, we just want to make sure, one, we know what we're doing, and that we're okay with opening up. Sometimes you might have to give up. I can't use all the features of this game because I'm not going to open up port number, XYZ. And so it's a decision. Let's just kind of think about it, similar to on our phone, if we download an app, I've ran across apps that, I wanted to download, but when I look at the permissions, I say, why does this app that's a measuring tape app want to look at my files that are on my phone? Nope, let me go to a next one, And probably, the majority of that time, it's probably not anything malicious, but it's probably lazy coding that, the coder is just, hey, it's easier to ask for permissions and for everything than figure out the exact ones that I need, but then that's a vulnerability. So I move on to the next one, and sometimes that's the difference between a free app and a paid app is the coding that's gone behind it. Is, they've had professional coders develop it, not that it doesn't work, but the security that comes with it. Mobile devices, most people hate carrying multiple phones, so we start with that being a fact. And so companies, for the most part, hate paying for multiple phones. So we start with those kind of facts. And then when we got to COVID, it kind of exacerbated this and said, okay, everyone can use your own devices. More companies said that. But it leaves out the ability for companies to control those devices. They're company-owned devices, and you leave, it's a company-owned device, they can wipe them remotely, they can, locate the devices remotely, they can say what can be installed, what can be removed. But now, if it's your personal device and you leave the company and you've got company data on there, now, are we getting legal involved with this? Or we're going to ask our legal department to take the time out to deal with each employee that leaves? That'd be expensive, and probably most organizations are just going to say they're going to put something in an exit interview and, give us a warning about that to delete company data. And that data's out there in the wild, if you will, just roaming around. So it's a risk. So it just BYODs is dangerous, it's convenient, but it's dangerous at the same time. So I put these up here because I get myself in trouble sometimes because I think I'm a pretty good electrician, and this is the way I sell it. That I say I have done data cabling my whole career for a long time. So data, electricity, hey, it's the same concept. So I can do this, and so then I inevitably get told, no, we're going to hire someone to do this. I'm working through this with some ceiling fans now, so you all, just work with me. I'm changing some ceiling fans out or trying to get away with not paying someone. But most of us know that, hey, if it's any major work, we're gonna, unless we've got a background in doing plumbing or electricity, we're gonna pay someone to do it. But when it comes to our home networks and our data, we're okay, winging it or getting the neighbor kid to come over and do it. I mean, we wouldn't get the neighbor kid to come over and, change out our electrical box, hopefully. But this is what we do with our home networks. As much, if we look at our electricity, the risk of electricity compared to our data, the risk of water compared to our data, and exposing to not only our networks, our corporate or company or government networks, is a lot less, So if it's anybody, we should be hiring a professional for our networks and our home networks. And if we want to wing something, we can wing it. The worst that can happen is, we're going to flood our house, and we've probably got homeowners insurance, but probably most of us don't have a cyber insurance. So we're going to get our house back, if we flood it or burn it down, but if we lose our data or get exposed to data, we're not going to get it back. And depending on if it was our fault and what industries that we work in, maybe we're paying fines there that can't be covered by insurance. think this is my last one. Oh, yeah. And so just talks about how to get trained. And so it's multiple ways. This is one of the things I like about, the tech field, the cyber field. Sometimes people ask, what's the best way? There's not, so it's just whatever works, for you. Some people, enjoy going to school, enjoy serving. Some people enjoy working on the job, apprentice. All that gets you to the same place and the same training. So it's not a, which route is better or more effective. It all gets to the same place. So this is kind of my limited social media sharing that I have. I talked about I'm not a big social media person, so LinkedIn is is kind of my main thing there. My friends get frustrated with me because I'm not on Facebook or any of those when they're trying to share pictures. I'm like, I've got text, you can send them to me. It's just old school or email. And any questions, comments? Yeah, so it's a growing field. Is cyber insurance. You can get business and personal cyber insurance too. Well, one thing, like if someone sued you for not, like if you happen to be the cause of a breach, and someone then tried to sue you for that, but then also that if you happen to, like in the case, like if you did lose something valuable that you had, like digital assets that you needed to, whether it's, documents like you talked about, tax documents or pictures, those are something a lot of times that we think about valuable to help us maybe pay for digital forensics recovery, like a data recovery service. Yep.
Here's a question for you. I'm a member of this community service organization. These are very successful and smart business people. And I was speaking to one of my colleagues the other day, and I said, "Where do you keep your passport?" And I'm making this up. Pulled a pad of paper out of her purse.
Yep.
And so the problem there is, how do they hire help? I mean, I can't go do it. I'm already the family help desk, and I can barely take that.
Yep.
Where do you thought about changing my name?
Well, I'm with you.
Get help for somebody. Look, we're all sitting here because we work in the IT world, and we understand the words that you're saying, except for spearfishing. And these are people who don't. If they listen to us talk to one another, they think we were speaking Swahili or something.
Yep.
They have no idea what we were saying. So how does something like that get help?
Yeah, so the kind of point is, how to get cyber to the boardroom. I think a lot of time the conversation, unfortunately, has to deal with dollars. Of if you don't do this, then what is it going to cost? Because sometimes that's their main. A lot of times that's the main focus. Of how much money am I making? And go ahead.
That would not be the main focus for these folks. These people are business community leaders. Money is not the problem. It is that if I say to them, go get somebody to help you, they're not going to know how to do that. So take money out of the equation to help me answer that question.
Yeah. So just even getting them to understand, okay, you need to go.
I've got them to understand. Let's say that
Gotcha.
that I've convinced them. I haven't. Let's
Yep.
pretend I have.
Yep.
And money's not an issue. How do I connect them with an expert, that professional?
Yeah.
I can't hear you. What'd you say? Yeah, exactly. What's a geek squad? Yeah, no, I know that. I hadn't heard that term. Okay, so that's a way to not invent the light bulb. How should
I guess to suggest that might be something that is missing. Of like just a consortium that says, okay, just to match up, you know, like cyber professionals with people that want to hire them.
Right.
Because now everyone's kind of doing, each cyber professional is doing their own, you know, thing. So that's, yeah, that might be a good, yeah, yeah. We might need to talk afterwards. Yeah, yeah. Thanks. Mm-hmm.
Specific to critical infrastructure workers, the trend towards remote work and distributed work, are you aware of any programs where they're providing like home assessments?
So the question was, aware of any programs that are providing home assessments? I am not. I know there's some cybersecurity clinics that are out there, but they usually focus on small businesses or not for helping out nonprofits, kind of like the law firm pro bono type situation, but not for home users. So that's another good, I think would be a good space is, you know, where does the average person go to get even information? Any other questions, comments? I appreciate you all letting me ramble for a few minutes this morning. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So a couple of things, this session was approved to be used, it's now over just a few minutes. So make sure you keep yourself stand in the back. If you leave the room, you can't come back. And also, stand in the back before you leave. The one thing I wanted to mention, the cyber insurance. AFCEA is partnered with GovTech Solutions. There's an insurance company that provides cyber insurance. So they just wanted to use cyber insurance.
May I have your permission to cut and paste out of them? You had some good stuff in there.
Dr. Harris, thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Being here, and everybody, thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Let me connect here.
You know, what I'm going to try to do with this first session with them is, and I mean, these people are multi-millionaires. They're not, they're running large businesses in some cases. One guy runs a shipping company, for example, like, you know, ships and trucks.
And what they do, they even think about
No,
like,
hell no.
Yep,
Hell
yep,
no.
yep.
I mean, it was astonishing when I talked to him. So what I'm going to do with this first talk is try to get them to start changing their mindset. I'm not going to be able to teach them to do this, but start thinking different. Start adopting a defensive mindset. You know, you picked up one I missed, which is your password vault, you got to put a complex password on it. That was excellent. And I got to tell you, I got to go look mine up because I'm using two-factor combined with Face ID, but I got a sneaking suspicion it's not what it ought to be. So that was a good pull.
all right.
Jim Davis 961. It's a Gmail account. It's just my personal one. So listen, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
No, and definitely keep in touch. I'd love to see how it goes.
I'll,
You know,
I'll
just
shoot you
keep
a
in
note
touch.
back with my contact info. Being the crack professional that I am, I left home without my business card.
Hey,
So I'll
same,
give you one.
same here. Appreciate you.
Thank you,
All right,
Jim.
Jeff. Yeah. I think so. I mean, those were some good points that you had about how did, where do people go